This episode is sponsored in honor of Rabbi Gurari and his family from State College, Pennsylvania, where you have much Chassidish anachas from all of his children and Matzliach in his holy work. The Frierdiker Rebbe related, the Chassid Reb Shmuel Boruch from Warsaw was in Lubavitch for 4 or 5 years straight, without a stop. He was a big maskil, and he knew fluently all printed Chassidus. He would always wear, winter and summer, warm clothing. And my father, the Rebbe Rashab, used to call him Imre Binadik, because he was fluent in the Sefer of the Mittler Rebbe, Imre Bina. The Chassid Reb Shmuel Boruch used to, in the middle of davening many times, take off his talis and tefillin, because he was afraid, since his mind would be so occupied with thinking Chassidus, that his talis and tefillin might just fall off without him realizing. So he would take off his talis and tefillin in the middle of davening. He would smoke a pipe and walk around the chutzner for a while and think Chassidus, because it was hard for him to do both things together, wearing talis and tefillin and thinking Chassidus. The Frierdiker Rebbe continues by describing 3 Chassidim, amongst them Reb Shmuel Boruch. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Reb Chanoich Handel was an example of Darchei Chassidim. He devoted himself to educate and guide the younger light. And just his Seder Avodah, his davening, etc., affected the other Chassidim tremendously. The Chassid Reb Abba Chachniker, he was Darchei Chassidus, meaning Reb Chanoich Handel was Darchei Chassidim, and Reb Abba Chachniker was Darchei Chassidus. Everything that he did was just for himself. And even though people were very nispal from his davening, it affected them in a way of makif hakorev. I will not explain what that means right now, but it had an effect on them, but not in a pnimius dike way. And the Chassid Reb Shmuel Boruch, he is Chassidus himself, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, like the makif harochik. And another Sikha, the Frierdiker Rebbe related that his father, the Rebbe Rashab, once wrote a letter to his cousin, the Mordechai Doiv Tzlonim, that lived in Eretz Yisrael. And in the letter, my father, the Rebbe Rashab, wrote at length the maila of thinking Chassidus before davening while wearing talis and tefillin. When the Chassid Reb Mordechai Tzlonim brought the letter with him to Lubavitch when he came for Shavuos, Tov Reish Nun Aleph, he became friendly then with 3 of the Ziknei Chassidim, Reb Chanoich Handel, Reb Shmuel Boruch from Warsaw, and Reb Meir Mordechai from Borisov, and he showed them a copy of the letter. And here the Frierdiker Rebbe goes on to describe a little bit about these 3 older Chassidim, and the Frierdiker Rebbe starts off by describing Reb Shmuel Boruch. And he says that the Chassid Reb Shmuel Boruch was from the Gdoilei HaMaskilim. He had tremendous chushim, senses, and he was a big amkan, meaning he learned very deeply. He was very old. I'm not sure how old he was then, and it seems like he himself didn't even know his exact age. When they would ask him how old he is, he would answer, I had enough time to forget already. Reb Shmuel Boruch came to Lubavitch when my Zayde, the Rebbe Maharash, was born in the year of Tov Kuf Tzadik Daled. And he stayed then in Lubavitch until the year of Tov Reish Vav. Then he traveled home, and 4 years later, Tov Reish Yud, he returned to Lubavitch, and he stayed there straight until Tov Reish Chavav. That's when the Tzemach Tzedek was nistalik. And then at Tov Reish Lamed Beis, that was during the days of the Rebbe Maharash, he returned to Lubavitch, and he stayed in Lubavitch for the rest of his life. Reb Shmuel Boruch was baki, meaning he was fluent in all the printed Chassidus, like Torah Oyer, Likutei Torah, the Siddur, the Mittler Rebbe's Farim, almost Baal Peh. And generally, he would speak very little. However, when he would ever open up his mouth to explain something, it says, Given was zu hören, meaning there was what to hear. And after the Frierdiker Rebbe goes on to describe the other 2 elder Chassidim, so the Frierdiker Rebbe finishes off, when these 3 elder Chassidim, Reb Shmuel Boruch, Reb Meir Mordechai, and Reb Chanoich Handel, got a copy of the letter where my father explains the mile of thinking Chassidus before davening while wearing talis and tefillin, they started to learn the letter. In the beginning, each one of them learned the letter by himself. And afterwards, they sat together to learn it together. And for the next few weeks, they kept learning this letter and discussing and speaking about the meaning of it. And that's how the letter spread in Lubavitch without my father's knowledge. The Frierdiker Rebbe once wrote in a letter that for Rosh Hashanah Tov Reish Mem Ches, that's when the Frierdiker Rebbe was 8 years old, 2 Zkenim came to Lubavitch to settle in Lubavitch, to stay in Lubavitch. The Chassid Reb Abba Chachniker and the Chassid Reb Shmuel Boruch from Warsaw. The Chassid of Shmuel Boruch already lived in Lubavitch before. However, since he had a sickness in his eyes, so he traveled to Vitebsk to see the doctors there, and he was there for over a year. And Elul Tafresh Mem Zayin, right before Tafresh Mem Ches, that's when he returned to Lubavitch. My uncle, the Razah, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, honored very much the elder Chassidim, and he had a tremendous desire to hear from them conversations, stories. So now when Rabbi Chashniker and Shmuel Boruch moved to Lubavitch, he always sat them at the head of the table and kept listening to everything they have to say, stories and hirois. My Rabbi, Reb Nissen Skabla, told me that every 2 days, once in 2 days, I should go and visit this elder Chassidim, Rabbi Chashniker and Shmuel Boruch from Warsaw, and hear stories from them. They used to sit in the Cheder Sheni of the small Zal. I will hear stories from them, and I will go back to my Rebbe, Reb Nissen, and repeat the stories to him. And my Rebbe, Reb Nissen, would explain to me the Hayrah from each story. In another Sikha, the Frierdiker Rebbe related, amongst the Ziknei Chassidei Chabad who will come to Lubavitch, to my father, the Rebbe Rashab, were also very old Chassidim who were zeiche to see the Mittel Rebbe when they were little kids. And they would repeat different Hayrahs and stories that they heard from the Ziknei Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. So the Chassid, the old Chassid of Shmuel Boruch from Warsaw, he once told me that he was a Talmid of his great uncle, the Chassid Berachmiel Tzvi, and that the Ziknei Chassidim, the Talmidim of the Alter Rebbe, once repeated one of the first Torahs that they heard from the Alter Rebbe, which my great uncle repeated to me. In that mimer, in that short mimer, the Alter Rebbe said that Torah in general and Torah Chassidus in specific, you should hear only from somebody who is a oived, somebody who toils to fix his midos, and they should stay away. They should be careful from a Chassidish liar, somebody who says Chassidus but he doesn't do in Avodah. And the Frierdiker Rebbe ended off, Chassidus we need to hear only from somebody who is a Baal Avodah, somebody who davens long, somebody who is into criticizing and examining his thoughts, speech, and actions, if they are the way Chassidus wants it to be. To such an Oived, we need to listen and hear and to hug and hold precious any word that he says. In another Sikha, the Frierdiker Rebbe related, when I was a little kid, once there was a Simchas Beis HaShoeva Fabrengen in the Sukkah, and I was there too. When it became very late at night, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I found the Chassid Reb Handel and the Chassid of Shmuel Boruch from Warsaw that are still sitting and Fabrengen in the Sukkah. When I fell asleep then in the Sukkah on a bench, my mother, the Rebbetzin, went in order to bring me into the house so I should sleep in my bed. But my father, the Rebbe Rashab, didn't let. And he said, soll sich walgeren zwischen Chassidim. Und der Oibishter soll helfen, als soll sich auswalgeren. Meaning that he let him roll, let him hang out amongst Chassidim, and Hashem should help that he should roll himself out, meaning that they should have a good effect. And then my father benched me with Arichos Yamim. And the Frierdiker Rebbe then finishes off and it says each person needs to know that Arichos Yamim means that the day should be long, that whatever needs to be done throughout the day should be done. When we give a bracha for Arichos Yamim, we take mean the simple meaning begashmius, that a person should live long. But in Arichos Yamim itself, the days need to be long, that the day should not go on in a lazy way without doing what we need to do. We need to know when the day becomes a day, and we need to recognize each hour of the day and to do everything that's needed to be done throughout the day. And that's the true meaning of Arichos Yamim. We'll finish off with a story that the Rav, Reb Zalman Shimon Dvarkin, related, the Rav of Crown Heights. Now, in the story that he actually relates about a chassid named Reb Yitzchak Baruch. And however, since the details of the story match very much with the chassid Reb Shmuel Boruch, and since he relates the story as saying that this was a famous chassid, and the famous chassid that we know from those times was Reb Shmuel Boruch, and Reb Yitzchak Baruch seems not to be somebody who was very famous, so it's possible that really the name was Reb Shmuel Boruch. So we're not sure if this story is about Reb Shmuel Boruch or some other chassid Reb Yitzchak Baruch, but it seems like it might have been a mistake and it was really Reb Shmuel Baruch. And it says like this: I heard from the Frierdiker Rebbe in Rostov that when he spoke about the famous chassid Reb Yitzchak Baruch or Reb Shmuel Baruch, which came from Warsaw, and he had a wife and kids, and he was baki b'shas and Rishonim and in all the Chassidus Farim, that in the year of Taf Reish, when he heard about the Tzemach Tzedek, he came to Lubavitch and he went into Yechidus. And the Tzemach Tzedek answered him all his questions. But there was one question that Tzemach Tzedek didn't answer him. But he told him, I will call you over after I will look into it, and then I will answer you. So when he came out of Yechidus, he sent a letter to his wife in Warsaw. And he wrote to her that I decided not to come back home. And if you want, I could send you a get. We could get a divorce because I'm staying here. And only 26 years later, Taf Reish Chavav, Tzemach Tzedek sent somebody to call him. And he answered him that question from 26 years ago. And Reb Shmuel Boruch said, for 26 years, which is the number of the Gematria of Shem Havaya, I stayed in Lubavitch to get an answer for the Shaila that I asked in Yechidus. And I need to stay for an additional 26 years to think about the meaning of the answer. And before he passed away, he called over the Chevre Kadisha, and he told them that it's time for me to pass away. So they asked him, Reb Shmuel Boruch, how do you know? So he said, I saw the Tzemach Tzedek. And right after he said that, he passed away. We'll finish off with a Niggun from Nikolaev, and the words, Veharikoisi lochem berocho. It is not clear who composed the Niggun. It's possible that one of the brothers, but it's not confirmed. And Chag HaShavuos, Tov Shin Chof, Rapini Altois sang this Niggun in front of the Rebbe. And that year, by the Farbrengen of Yud Beis Tammuz, the Rebbe asked his son, Rapini Altois' son, Binyamin Altois, that he should sing it. The Altois family was from Nikolaev, and his Niggun is from Nikolaev. 2 years later, Yud Beis Tammuz Tov Shin Chav Gimel, 3 years later, the Farbrengen then, Yud Beis Tammuz, was a short while after Rapini Altois passed away. So the Rebbe mentioned Rapini by the Farbrengen, and he said, since we have his Niggun, Veharikoisi lochem berocho, which is a Niggun that he would sing a lot, so Mistama, there are people here who know this Niggun, so we should sing the Niggun Veharikoisi lochem berocho. And the Rebbe added that Mistama, probably, he would also join us in the singing. We'll first play it the way it's sung by Rapini Altois' brother, Reb Shmuel Betzalel Altois from Australia, and then a recording of the Rebbe singing it by a Farbrengen.
Veharikoisi lochem berocho, Veharikoisi lochem berocho, Veharikoisi lochem berocho, berocho b'nei dai, lochem berocho, Veharikoisi lochem berocho, Veharikoisi lochem berocho,
Veharikoisi lochem berocho tonight. Veharikoisi Hallelujah.